for coming. If you don't know me, I'm Dr. Crystal Heath. I am the Executive Director of Our Honor, and Our Honor empowers and supports veterinarians and veterinary professionals to work for the best interests of others, no matter their species. I'm also on the founding committee of Veterinarians Against Ventilation Shutdown, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And I am on the board of LEAP, which stands for Leaders for Ethics, Animals, and the Planet, and we teach kids about farmed animals and how to care for them through farm animal sanctuaries. So let me go to my right slides here. I used to be in 4-H growing up. I grew up in rural Northern California. I was vice president of my 4-H club, and we raised goats, chickens, horses, and this is an off-the-track thoroughbred named Lucy that I showed up to pre-St. George level dressage. In 4-H, we were taught that being a steward of animals, whether the animals were for food, fiber, sport, comes with responsibilities, and you had a responsibility to provide them with food, shelter, water, veterinary care, and a quick and painless death when that time comes. But today we're going to be talking about depopulation, and depopulation is a relatively new phenomenon that's come about because we raise animals in such large numbers that we can no longer give them a quick and painless death. And what are the implications of that? And what is the veterinarian's role in trying to figure out the best way to manage these situations? I spent 5 months investigating the avian influenza outbreak in the Central Valley of California. I've captured thousands of images from more than 50 dairy and poultry facilities. And my footage has garnered much press attention, including in Vanity Fair, Newsweek, The Guardian, Reuters. Business Insider released a video recently. Encourage you to check that out. And this Sunday, 60 Minutes will be doing an episode that includes some of our footage as well. And next week will be a story in BBC Science Focus. So it also garnered headlines across the world. We had two articles in Der Spiegel, which is Germany's largest publication, Le Monde, which is France's largest publication, and a story in Elle magazine in France. So avian influenza has infected 1,020 herds across the country, dairy herds across the country, with 763 herds in California. And you might be wondering why California has this huge spike. California is the nation's largest dairy state. The next one is Wisconsin, and New York is the third largest dairy state, but you'll see Wisconsin is not anywhere on this list. New York isn't anywhere on this list. Why is that? I've talked to producers in Wisconsin who think that it is in Wisconsin, but they just aren't testing, so we don't know. And that might be true of New York as well, since we've had an outbreak of avian flu in New York across the Queens markets. So this is Tulare County, California. This is the epicenter of the avian influenza outbreak in dairy herds. California produces 20% of our nation's dairy, and this is what it looks like. So you have these huge dairies right next to poultry facilities, and it's been shown that the dairies spread the disease to the poultry facilities. And so this is the heart of the Central Valley, and Tulare Lake used to be the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi. It was twice the size of Lake Tahoe, 512,000 acres, 800 square miles. And this was the home of the Tachi people, which is the largest tribe in California. It was their food source, their culture, their life. Then agriculture came in, drained Tulare Lake, and now we have what we have today, this patchwork of dairies and poultry facilities. And the Tachi's food source vanished, and so did the Tachi people. But in 2023, floodwaters returned water to the lake. There was record snow melt, and this was what happened. The effects were devastating. There was $20 billion in losses for the dairy industry. And especially the losses were great for the confined animals who had lived there. This shot shows the flooding, and you can see this dairy facility in the back. These paddocks turned into lakes, and it was devastating. And now we have bird flu in California. And this is a shot I took of a dairy facility that is right across the street from a very large poultry facility that depopulated their birds due to avian influenza. So this is what it looks like. So you have literally thousands of birds in these dairies. And the producers say these are biosecure facilities, but how can it possibly be a biosecure facility? These birds are feeding off of the cow's food. It attracts them to the area, and there's just, really nothing they can do. And this is, let's see if I can go. So this is the egg facility right across the street. This is one of the largest egg facilities, cage-free egg facilities in the country. And you can see, that's the dairy over there, and right across the street is this egg facility. And these were some of the workers that I saw. Come on, click over. See if I can get to the next slide. There we go. So I took these photos with a telephoto lens, and you can see the workers are cleaning up the mess, but they're not wearing masks. Why aren't they wearing masks? Who knows? It's against OSHA guidelines, especially related to depopulation. Avian flu stays on services for 120 days, unless it's thoroughly disinfected and they test it and they know that there's no avian flu here. It can stay on duck feathers for 160 days. And I'm concerned that it's so hard to get workers to do this work that the employers aren't really adequately warning the workers of the risk. Because if they did, they might not be able to get enough people to do this work. And workers are also very worried about getting tested for avian flu. Most of them are immigrants from other countries, and they don't want to get on the government's radar. They are also worried if they do test positive that they wouldn't be allowed to come to work and they can't miss time off work. So I think this is just a problem for public health and the potential spread of the disease. Is this the same? Let's go back here. Okay, there we go. So this is another dairy, and you have cows with nasal discharge, and you'll see those aborted fetuses in the front with lots of flies, and I'm worried that flies might also be a source of spread of this virus. And these baby cows, I went back the next day, and they were still there the next morning. This is a dairy digester. So you see this big balloon thing in the back, this huge thing. That's a giant tarp covering this manure lagoon. And what they do is they capture the methane, and then they sell these low carbon fuel standard credits to fossil fuel companies. And the dairies who do this end up making more money selling these low carbon fuel standard credits than they do selling milk. And the state has incentivized this by giving these dairies millions of dollars to put in these dairy digesters. So this sort of just incentivizes this expansion of this system. More pictures of the aborted fetuses and the cows. And so sorry, trigger warning, like this is really gross footage, but these are the dead cows that I saw just piled on the side of the road in California. More and lots of baby cows. And a journalist came because of my footage and wanted to see for themselves, and he saw dogs coming up and sniffing these cows. So these are just like out there in the open. And I was worried that they're not covered. There's no signage anywhere. Like you wouldn't even know that there's some sort of infectious disease outbreak that's potentially zoonotic if you weren't aware. And so I reached out to the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and I asked them Here, let me just show you this video real fast. So this is a cow passing some placenta here. And more just like so many birds. So first, what's the legalities of just leaving these carcasses on the side of the road? The producers say they need to leave them on the side of the road so the rendering trucks can come pick them up and not enter their facility and potentially spread the disease from farm to farm, which totally makes sense. But the rendering trucks were backed up because there were so many cows dying. And the law says animal carcasses from animals on pasture or rangeland shall be managed so as to prevent the creation of excessive vectors or other adverse public health well-being conditions. So I sent a letter to the CDFA expressing my concerns about these carcasses being left open and asked them if they could recommend covering them, spraying them with fly repellent to prevent the spread, and put clear biosecurity signage up, warning the public and the workers of the risk of this. They never got back to me. They never responded in any way, which is sort of classic. So a lot of people in the industry are really not happy that I took this footage, and I didn't trespass or anything. This is all footage I took from public roads using a zoom lens. TDF Honest Farming is this page with more than 1 million followers. They posted screenshots of my Twitter account and these pictures that I took of dead cows and said, just a heads up for those of you in California, this vegan veterinarian is taking photos of your farms. One person replied saying this vet should have her license revoked. Posting photos like this are a breach of confidentiality. If your medical doctor was doing this, they'd be facing criminal charges, which is interesting because you wouldn't be leaving human dead bodies on the side of the road. And it's like now they're advocating for animal rights, like animals are deserving of privacy, yet they're impregnating them so that they can produce milk so that we can profit from them. It's like, do they want animal rights or not? I'm not sure. It seems only when it suits their agenda. It's kind of, so yeah, it's, and this other person said, hey folks in California, only you reporting her is going to get her license revoked. Your voice has more weight than those outside the state. This is a veterinary colleague of mine who wrote that she's not their vet. She is an activist. She doesn't have a patient-client relationship, so no breach. She is a horrible stain on my profession, however, and is very well known and widely avoided by other veterinarians. That got 121 likes on that post. So yeah. So in order to understand why the veterinary profession is responding this way, we have to understand sort of the culture and the training of veterinarians. I wrote an op-ed and I sent it to a veterinary group, and the veterinarian who graduated from here, Cornell, several years ago, reached out and told me this. I am still haunted by my vet school days when we tried to adopt our surgery sheep to live on our small farm after non-terminal procedures were performed on her, and even got to the point of considering stealing her rather than letting her be euthanized after our entreaties to the faculty were rebuffed. One of our classmates ratted us out, and we were threatened with expulsion if the sheep disappeared. I was also called into the dean's office after helping found an AVAR chapter at Cornell, and AVAR stands for Association of Veterinarians for Animal Rights. Now that has become Humane Society Veterinary Association. Because they were worried I would be breaking into research labs, stealing animals, and destroying property, which AVAR is not an organization that recommends doing that. Like this is what they always make animal rights activists seem like, these violent people who are breaking the rules and not just advocating for, change for animals. The messages were clear. Animals were a means to an end, not an end unto themselves. As you noted, many vet students end up embracing this ideology to varying degrees. And why is that? So this is a really important concept to understand why things are the way they are. So it's human nature to to derogate the do-gooder. This has implications for policy and why it's so hard to change systems. This paper found that moral reproach, even when it's implied, can sting deeply. Why? Because most people care profoundly about their moral identity. And research shows we tend to be seen as good, we tend to value being seen as good even more than being seen as competent. That's why people react defensively or even with hostility when they feel morally judged. And here's where it gets like especially relevant to those who take strong ethical stances. What the paper calls morally motivated minorities can trigger resentment in others, not because they're wrong, but because their presence alone can feel like a challenge to the status quo. We all feel that. So it raises this tough question for veterinarians. How can we advocate for animal welfare or animal rights or principles like the 3 R's when human nature itself tends to derogate the do-gooder? And we will discuss that. I think raising awareness about this phenomenon is a start, like just warning people ahead of time. You might feel some resentment when I'm about to advocate, and that's okay. And just like normalizing this idea of like, this is what prevents change from happening. So this isn't just a problem with the veterinary profession. This is medical students, human medical students are dealing with this too. And this is a wonderful paper written by a medical student who's trying to describe how she's gonna steel herself against this tendency to be complicit in harm because of her profession. And the moral vulnerability as a doctor, because it's been shown that students, medical students, veterinary students become less empathetic as they progress through medical training. It's because the hierarchies, the way we use euphemisms, we say sacrifice and euthanize instead of kill, that all sort of normalizes us to violence. And we have to cause harm sometimes to heal. Making your first cut in surgery is like a very scary experience, like you're cutting into a live animal, but then over time you get kind of used to it. Even euthanizing animals, it's like the first time you do it, it's really scary, and then it just becomes normal, and that really messes with people. Like I've talked to many vet techs, veterinarians who worked at emergency clinics, and they're like, it's weird, I had to leave because after a while I didn't feel anything after euthanizing animals anymore. And in World War II, 7% of German doctors joined the SS, where only 1% of the regular population did. And Colany found that most doctors who participated in the Holocaust weren't inherently different from us. They were ordinary people who believed that they were doing something unpleasant but morally necessary. New doctors quickly came to see the horrors of the camps as just how things are. And we think, oh, we've learned from the Holocaust, like we don't do that anymore, but we actually do. There's still human experiments happening, even though humans have rights and protections, that they have found these were unethical. People died for years before they realized that, before somebody spoke up about it. Most recently, this book, The Occasional Human Sacrifice, goes into all of these different modern day human experiments that happened in the whistleblowers and what they went through to try to raise awareness about these things. And he talks about one in the 2010s at the Karolinska, where this doctor performed these tracheal transplant surgeries, and many people died before other doctors came forward and voiced concerns about it. And they say it's because this Karolinska is this very esteemed institution, and I think everybody who's there is doing things the right way, and they're very loyal. It's hard to get into, and you can't believe that this institution is doing something wrong, and so everybody kind of defends it, and they defend what's going on. So I think the answer to that is just don't simp for these organizations. Don't for your school. Don't assume that what they're doing is right. Question everything, especially when the stakes are life and death. And Colany concludes by saying, as we progress through medical school, perhaps one part of leading an ethical life as a physician is not allowing one's moral compass to be recalibrated by authority and socialization. And the human medical profession is grappling with this, and they're taking steps to mitigate this problem. But unfortunately, the veterinary profession is not. And we'll go into why that is. And in fact, veterinary education harms students' moral growth. They have found that veterinary students are morally stunted. They do not show the same increases in moral reasoning as other fields. And so this is a quote from a book by Bernard Rowland, who is a professor was a professor at Colorado State University. He's now passed away, but he talks about this one student who beat on a dog with a sledgehammer and spent the semester repairing the damage, and he received an A. Now that's kind of thing isn't done anymore, but we are still killing animals in veterinary education, and veterinary students are still to this day suffering consequences, lost opportunities for voicing concerns and being conscientious objectors to this. But there are many veterinarians who were conscientious objectors and work to change things in their schools and have other models. UC Davis, I went to UC Davis. They're still doing terminal surgeries on pigs and on calves, but they don't do them on dogs anymore. And I didn't take those classes that required terminal labs. And even though I didn't practice on an animal who would be killed for my training, surgery is my favorite part of schooling. I don't feel like I missed out at all. It's regretful that I didn't take those large animal classes, and that's not fair to students. So you shouldn't have to be a conscientious objector and just not take those farm animal classes because you want to have an ethical education. So what is the answer? How do we train students? I think an access to care model is the way we should be training students, and that's providing care to animals under the guidance of experienced surgeons, and that's how I learned. And now I teach students about surgery and high quality, high volume spay-neuter surgery and animals who need it. And now in my regular job, I do high quality, high volume spay-neuter. We spay-neuter about 100 cats a day with 2 vets. And it's really important, rewarding work, and I love it. And I think we need to be doing more of that and training more people how to do that. Bradley Miller, the founder of the Humane Farming Association, says, teaching a child not to step on a caterpillar is as valuable to the child as it is to the caterpillar. But the AVMA disagrees, and they hold the power to accredit schools and approve curriculum. And when experts like Dr. Andrew Knight and Nick Jukes, who have written papers on humane alternatives, requested to speak at the AVMA convention, their talks were denied. So who is the AVMA? This is the most powerful force in veterinary medicine. It has the Council on Education, deciding which schools get accredited. It also sets policies that government agencies follow, and it lobbies Congress through its own PAC. So when the AVMA makes a move, the profession feels it. But who controls the AVMA? Not its member veterinarians. It's Cargill, Merck, Boehringer Ingelheim, these agribusiness and pharmaceutical giants that have a stake in keeping the status quo. And they are the ones really sponsoring this conversation. So now back to avian influenza. I was just in Queens where the outbreak is happening. And because there's this outbreak, public health officials have advised workers to wear masks when they're handling these poultry birds. And I went to numerous markets and I found that is not the case. They're not wearing masks. And I don't like it when animal rights activists film workers and say like, hey, gotcha, like you're doing something wrong, because the companies love to like, we fired that worker. Don't worry, they're being deported. We've solved the problem. And it's not like the worker doing something bad, that's the problem. It's the system that they're working under. They believe they're doing a difficult but necessary job. And this is also a system that normalizes them to violence. It's very unnatural for somebody to kill for 8 hours a day, but they've been led to believe that they're doing hard work that's valuable and needed, and nobody tells them of the risks of this work. and what it does to you psychologically and physically. And so this is why you'll see these workers handling these birds very roughly, and they're not wearing masks, and very hostile towards me for even videoing this, because it's viewed as, when somebody comes in and films, it's like, oh, these animal rights activists again judging us and all of that. So it's the footage. So he's like, ma'am, camera, and that's their private business. So I can't stand there and be like, free speech, because if they say leave, I have to leave. That's their private spot. So that's just a small market. When those places have to depopulate, it's grueling, grisly, but it can usually be done, by those workers who work there. They're killing their birds anyway. So it's nothing different than what they would normally be doing. But when you have a facility with 2 million birds, how do you do this? And you have to ask, why when we expose wrongdoing or somebody behaving badly towards an animal on camera, why is all this outrage reserved for people we catch, one individual we catch on camera, when the people who institutionalize violence get rewarded, often handsomely, with millions of dollars? So this is footage from the North Carolina Prestige Department of Poultry Science. And this is footage of the birds that they put these birds in boxes, put in heat, and see how long it takes for them to die. And this research was done to legitimize the most common depopulation method, which is ventilation shutdown. So trigger warning, and just show a few seconds of what the birds experience. And this is a study that was funded with a $100,000 grant from the U.S. Poultry and Egg Association. And this researcher said that these birds aren't suffering, and this is a humane way of killing these birds. So why are we trying to figure out how to kill birds with heat stroke? It's because since 2022, 168 million birds have been exterminated due to bird flu. In 1 month alone, 7% of the entire US flock has been wiped out. And they needed to develop this more economic, efficient way of killing these birds. But what are the implications of legitimizing this method? Are we prioritizing economic interests over animal welfare? Are there less cruel ways to do it? And if so, why aren't we using them? There are less cruel ways. This is a list of the less cruel ways. There's nitrogen gas and nitrogen foam. Nitrogen foam results in the birds becoming unconscious in a few seconds and dying a few minutes later. Why aren't we using this? Well, because the 2019 AVMA guidelines for depopulation of animals did not include this method in their guidelines. Other countries like the UK don't even allow ventilation shutdown. This is the method that they use, but we didn't even include that. And what are the implications of the AVMA not allowing or not condoning this method and instead allowing ventilation shutdown in constrained circumstances? Well, this sets USDA policy for how the USDA responds to infectious disease outbreaks. So the USDA pitched in $36,000 to write this document. And this kind of shaped how depopulations were done. So this all started back in 2020, during the COVID-19 outbreak. The slaughterhouse workers got sick because they were working in close proximity. That dropped the slaughterhouse capacity by 45%. And the pig industry, which runs in this just-in-time model, their pigs were quickly outgrowing their pens. They had piglets coming in, right behind those pigs that were supposed to be sent to slaughter. And they ran out of space. They tried reducing the feed. That wasn't working. And they never put plans in place to what they would do if there was this bottleneck at the slaughterhouses. So they resorted to sealing up the buildings, pumping in heat and steam, and waiting for the pigs inside to die. This is an email we obtained by a Freedom of Information Act request from the Pork Board. And this is veterinarian Liz Wagstrom of the National Pork Producers Council, who says, I did suggest our state execs study animal cruelty laws in their states to determine if there would be liability to prosecution if they practice VSD or even mass euthanasia. So they knew that what they were doing was in many areas in violation of animal cruelty laws, but the AVMA legitimized it. And this is an email from Dr. Harry Snelson of the American Association of Swine Vets, who said, in response to, they're kind of discussing a draft of the AVMA press release about this. And they said, I agree it's wordy, but it's supportive of the situation. And I agree, coming from the AVMA, it's going to take a veterinary perspective rather than a producer perspective. And I think that's what you want for producers. It will provide the professional support for what we are likely going to have to do. So you need veterinarians to legitimize this to the general public to maintain consumer confidence in this industry. And when activists released hours of audio and video footage of ventilation shutdown taking place, Iowa Select Farms, who was one farm that did this, their communication director assuaged public outrage by saying that veterinarians and production well-being professionals are overseeing the process to assure accordance with the American Association of Swine Veterinarians and the American Veterinary Medical Association. So veterinarians were horrified by this, and we founded Veterinarians Against Ventilation Shutdown to let the public know we were not okay with this. And we asked the AVMA to reclassify this as not recommended. But standing up to these industries comes at a cost. So what happens to the veterinarians who speak out? This is a meme that went around about me saying, beware, Dr. Crystal Heath has an agenda that doesn't include anything positive for the profession. We recommend you block this person, Dr. Crystal Heath. I was barred from many veterinary Facebook groups. And luckily, most veterinarians, when this sort of thing would happen to them, suffer severe mental distress. They become less vocal about animal issues and they end up leaving quietly. That's likely what they were hoping for. I am lucky enough to have connections with the media. I was friends with somebody who was friends with Glenn Greenwald, who won the Pulitzer Prize for breaking the Edward Snowden story, which is about the National Security Agency's surveillance programs. And he wrote this wonderful story for The Intercept about what happened to me. But even despite all of this coming to light, I am still suffering the backlash from this today. I was barred from attending the AVMA's Cargill-sponsored Humane Ending Symposium, even though I've been a member of the AVMA for, 13 years now. And when Jennifer Fiala of AVMA leadership asked why I was barred, they basically implied that because other anti-VSD activists had staged protests that our presence posed some kind of threat. And they said, we don't want anything to hinder their ability, the producer's ability to share information. We can't have people afraid to provide information because they're afraid they'll be publicly targeted. When we haven't publicly targeted anyone, but I have been publicly targeted, obviously, and lost opportunities because of my position. So it's like they're projecting, I was barred from attending the AVMA's legislative fly-in. They sent me this snarky email that says, and they didn't even sign it, the issues we'll be talking about include legislation such as the Healthy Dog Importation Act and participants in the fly-in will be focused on these particular issues versus the issues you care so passionately about. And I was also barred from speaking at the SAVMA Symposium, and they said it's because your prior conduct, actions, and positions. And when I asked them about what they were referring to, what prior conduct, actions, and positions they meant, they're like, the ones you're already aware of, and this discussion is over. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. So this is also this professor veterinarian at North Carolina State University has this egg news blog, and he said that I am a militant vegan with a streak of zealotry, and basically implied that I would be violent, which pretty much I think it might make people think that I'm part of this Zizian death cult. He also says like this Berkeley veterinarian, which now I live in Los Angeles. So, but it's damaging and to my reputation for people to think that I'm some sort of murderous vegan. But like, obviously, if you kill humans who are animals or even harm them, I don't think you should be considered vegan. So the principles of veterinary medical ethics state that you should not make false or misleading statements that would defame or injure the professional standing or reputation of other veterinarians. But literally, like, that's what AVMA leadership is doing to me. A veterinarian must be honest and fair in their relations with others, and they should not engage in fraud, misrepresentation, or deceit. It also says a veterinarian has an ethical responsibility to report suspected animal cruelty and or abuse. And humans, animals, and the environment are inextricably linked, and veterinarians should support collaborative efforts to obtain optimal health for all three. But one AVMA leader says, mass poultry depopulation by ventilation shutdown in combination with a secondary method is considered humane and fully supported by hundreds of veterinarians who worked on this reference committee. But this is a poll done of 3,059 veterinarians on the Veterinary Information Network, and it showed that only 1.1% believe VSD is an ethical and humane method of depopulation. 23.5% believe it is neither ethical nor humane, but sometimes may be necessary, and 42.2% believe it is neither ethical nor humane and don't believe that there's ever any valid reason for its use. So after this, more than a year went by, nothing changed. Bird flu was raging, and they were using ventilation shutdown to kill these birds. So we submitted a petition again to the AVMA with 278 veterinarians signing on because they raised the bar. It used to be 50 veterinarians needed to submit a petition. Then they raised it to 200. And the petition was not heard at all. They actually then changed the House of Delegates manual so that petitions like ours could not go forward. And this is a video of the director of the AVMA's Animal Welfare Division. Oh, you know what? I don't think you can hear sound coming from this, unfortunately. Yeah, that's too bad. I'll just kind of tell you what she says. This is which. I wonder if there's some way.
It looks like there's closed captions at the bottom. Sorry.
Let's see. Oh, good. Yes. Let's see. Okay, so this is at the Animal Mortality Management Conference back in June of 2022. She says, so you're a more friendly audience than what I've had a chance to present for over the past few years is we need data from you. And I know that we've seen some presented here, even if it's not published, even if it's proprietary data, even if it's a case report, if it's unpublished data, the panel needs it. Some of these methods are at risk of leaving the guidelines, and I think you probably have an idea of what those methods might be. We need data to support them staying in the document. So even if you have any questions about that and how AVMA handles some of that data when it's unpublished, and I have been involved in the handling of some of that data. I'm happy to speak with you about it, and Mike Murphy, Warren Tess are down here as well. While they don't provide direct support to the panels, they are well acquainted with AVMA's processes. So what is she talking about? She's talking about cherry picking data to support leaving ventilation shutdown in the guidelines. And the AVMA released its new draft of the guidelines for depopulation of animals. It does not include anything critical of VSD, any research papers that were critical of VSD, only papers that were supportive of it. They changed the system. Instead of preferred, recommended in constrained circumstances, and not recommended, it's now tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which I kind of think is just to kind of confuse people about what they mean. And VSD plus is still listed as a tier 2 method for poultry and a tier 3 method for pigs. And some people argue that VSD is necessary to keep the price of food low. Is that true? Well, Cal-Maine Foods is the nation's largest egg producer. They used VSD to kill their birds when they were infected with avian influenza. Their stock price has more than doubled over the past year. Their quarterly sales skyrocketed 718% because of the rising cost of eggs. They received $44 million in bailouts for using VSD. This is a multi-billion-dollar company. They have the resources to put plans in place to use less cruel methods, but because the AVMA's guidelines allow for VSD, they don't have to. So other companies, Jennie-O Turkey Store received $120 million. Herbrooks Poultry Ranch came in second with $89 million. Cal-Maine Foods is third. And now the government is increasing those bailout monies to these corporations from $7 a bird to $17 a bird. And this money isn't going to like the contract farmers who are usually poor and taking care of the birds. This goes to the corporations. So yeah, and we found all this payment data is available publicly at usaspending.gov. And we collected the data and we found, and we also got FOIA documents from the USDA to determine what method of depopulation was used at events. We matched the payment data to the depopulations, and we discovered that the top bailout recipients, top 15 ones, all used VSD to kill their birds. So these are the wealthiest companies are the ones using VSD. They have the resources to use less cruel methods, but they are not doing that. And our work was featured in the front page of the New York Times back in April of last year. And so just to reiterate how this works, so you have industry-funded data doing research at an industry-funded public university that created the research necessary that the AVMA took to put ventilation shutdown in the guidelines so that the USDA can now give money back to the very industry that created the data in the first place and the methods in the first place. So why is this a problem? We are seeing an increase in infectious disease events. This is the infectious disease trap of animal agriculture. And animal agriculture leads to deforestation, and that leads to greater human interaction with wild animals. But even if we wanted to stop deforestation, that would lead to increased intensification to conserve land. When you have either deforestation for animal agriculture or increased intensification, that leads the price of meat to go down. Demand for animal protein is elastic with respect to cost. So when the price goes down, you have increased consumer demand for it. And that leads to greater intensification, greater deforestation if needed. And with greater intensification, you also have thousands of genetically similar animals packed in contact with human beings, which also leads to infectious disease outbreaks. So this is the trap of demand, deforestation, forest conservation, intensification, all leads to increasing infectious disease outbreaks. So how are these viruses spread? How do they jump species like this? So birds have alpha 2-3 linked sialic acid receptors. Humans have alpha 2-6 linked. Pigs have both, and we're finding out maybe cows too. Cows in their mammary glands have similar receptors to human eyes, and that allows this mixing vessel. So if you have a pig infected with the human seasonal flu and the bird flu, the genes can reassort, and then you can create a virus that can potentially spread from human to human, causing the next human pandemic. And we saw this with the 2009 swine flu, H1N1, which was a reassortment of avian, swine, and human seasonal flu viruses. And so this is what the dairy workers look like. We've had around 70 people infected with avian influenza. Only a couple have died. But we're told like, oh, it's just mild conjunctivitis, but this is what it actually looks like. It's subconjunctival hemorrhage. And we used to think that this outbreak in dairy cows was just this one event where it spilled over from a bird into a cow and then spread from there. But now through testing, we're discovering there are multiple events. And now most recently, we found the genotype D11 virus in cows. And that's concerning because this is the strain that led to severe disease in human beings. John Korsland, who's a former USDA scientist, said, I can't overemphasize what a big deal this is. This is truly an S show unfolding into a nightmare. We have no idea how widespread this version of the virus already is in cows. This is this child in British Columbia who was infected with this virus, and she was on ECMO. This is what the radiograph of her chest looked like. So ECMO is extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. We only have so many of these. These are like heart and lung bypass machines. So if this virus was to spread from person to person, we would not have enough ECMOs to treat everybody. All this while we can now make cow's milk without cows. And this is using precision fermentation. We can make cow protein. And some say that if we did this, we could produce enough protein to feed the world using an area the size of London. And this other company is making egg protein using potatoes. So that would be a game changer too. This is the commercial company doing that. And this study found that if we shifted away from animal-based protein, we would save $7.3 trillion globally in health burdens and ecosystem degradation. And work out of the Chan School of Public Health shows that high-density livestock operations are the opportune environments for these spillover events from wild animals into livestock, or as incubators for pandemic influenza strains, as we've seen. And large pig and poultry farms are where genetic reassortment needed to source pandemic influenza strains are most likely to occur. But unfortunately, in the veterinary profession, I've attended several talks on climate change and sustainability, and the message is always the same of like, well, demand for meat is going up, and we've got to do our best to deal with this. But it fails to acknowledge who's really causing this demand. It's not consumers who are demanding this. I think if you had the option of like, do I want an animal-free thing or animal-based thing, like you would, if it's the same price, if it's the same everything taste, you would choose the animal-free option. So it's really the corporations that are creating this demand and lobbying government. And 73% of dairy revenues come from some form of subsidy too. So now 60% of the biomass on Earth is farmed animals. Only 4% are wild animals. And 70% are farmed poultry. Only 30% are wild birds. We've lost 83% of our wild mammals and 50% of our plant species. And this is the historical model, the triangle on the left of the veterinary profession. You have man at the top, and really it should be corporations at the top, women underneath, and species ranked in order of their moral concern for us. But really, One Health shows us that we're all interconnected, and if we harm one species, we harm all of us. And researchers say that are finding that we developed the ability to empathize with other animals more than 100,000 years ago. And when our survival depended on it, this skill made us strategic hunters. But we were killers with emotional baggage. And seeing the suffering of animals weighs on us. Matthew Scully, who was a speechwriter for John McCain, George Bush, who has written extensively about animal rights issues and wrote the book Dominion, says, when you start with a necessary evil and then over time the necessity passes away, what's left? So how do we push back against this system? I say join the veterinary profession, because if you are a veterinarian, you have public trust more than an animal rights activist. And you can change systems. And despite everything that's happened to me, I have a great job. I love what I do. And it's been really rewarding to join with other veterinarians who are addressing this issue. I think change will happen quite rapidly when we get more veterinarians who are on our side. So let's work and support those who are working for change. Stop bullying, raise awareness about these issues, and don't be afraid to talk about them. We do live streams so a week, so please, if you can, join our live streams, and we'll talk more about these issues and build community and take action. We do lots of cool stuff there, so please check us out.
And if you want to share this talk also.
And share this talk, please. Yes. And yeah, have any of you watched Severance? Do you know the TV show Severance? Oh my God, yes. Watch it. It's got a lot of animal rights themes. So spoiler alert here, this scene. It's very interesting because there's one part where one of the characters, the concept of the show is like you have an inner worker person and an outer self, and the inner self doesn't know anything about the outer self. You sever your brain, so you only know your work stuff, and you only know your outer stuff. So, but in order to quit in the beginning, you have to get your outie's permission to quit. So your innie is pretty much a slave, and in the first season they torture the innies and stuff. And one character wants to quit, and literally her outie tells her innie through video, "You're not a person, you are not real," which kind of makes us think about animals. That's how we treat animals, because we don't have any memory of what they go through. We're fine just torturing them. And it turns out, according to the show, even if you're harming yourself, you're okay with that as long as you have no memory of it, if you can get the money for their work, their labor. You can check out our recent press at ouronor.org/press too. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and we can talk here if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Really amazing presentation.
Yes.
I do have one question. Just from your footage, I'm wondering what you assume the dairy industry is going to do, because it looks like they're going to lose a lot of profit, which is not their interest. And I'm just wondering, what is their plan?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think they're in denial. I think, Tom Vilsack, who is the head of the USDA, was kind of just saying, oh, it's going to burn itself out. But now we're seeing dairies that were previously infected be reinfected again. I think ultimately they're going to vaccinate, and that will be, a little stopgap for a time being, but we're in this ever escalating arms race against nature. But the virus is mutating. We'll continue to develop new vaccines every year. So Big Pharma is going to get bigger, profit from this for sure. That's the big thing. When we're fighting against the animal protein industry, we're also fighting against the pharmaceutical industry that depends on the increasing number of slaughter-bound animals for their profits. So it's a huge thing that we're up against. The thing about the avian flu thing is only around probably 5% of the infected cows are dying. It's hard to know the exact numbers. It does reduce their milk production a bit. And they do lose money when the cows do die, or if the cows are thin and don't return to full milk, they end up sending them to slaughter, and they don't get a lot of money from slaughter because they look so bad. I mean, I hope it might lead these dairies to like get in another line of business, but we subsidize them so much, 73% of their profits. Will it end up hurting them or not? I don't know. We'll see. Any other questions?
So you talked about how you wanted to take across your views in AVMA, right? And how you were targeted by a few of them, like in your profession, AVMA was targeting you, kind of like stopping you from speaking again and whatever the policies they're following. So what's the way out of all of this in your profession? Like if you wanna make an opinion and want to like publicize it, how do you fight against such an organization? Or how do your colleagues fight against such a big organization which people tend to believe?
It's really hard. I mean, there are more, I'm very outspoken and I write a lot in the media and stuff. And so I like raise awareness about this through the media. And even like the British Veterinary Journal has written about the AVMA and what they're doing, which, you know, so through the international press, they're getting a lot of attention that way too, which I think is hopeful. Then there are veterinarians, you know, playing nice with the AVMA on the inside, getting seats in committees and joining the House of Delegates. And, you know, that's one way. If you're like not an outspoken person, you don't want to like just talk about it in live streams and like on the media, just, you know, being that normal vet, okay, come sign up for a committee. And then once you get on a committee, start to change things or like not go along with things. I mean, that's hard too, because the second you go against the grain or the industry, they're going to push back. But I think the more that students, the next generation I tell about this, so many people are getting so pissed at the AVMA already. I think that might make a difference, but it's hard. I don't know what the right answer is other than just veterinarians joining together and speaking out. People have said, oh, why don't you start your own organization? It's like, well, we have, but the AVMA has been around since like the 1860s. They've got this huge infrastructure. They've got millions of dollars. So we're trying to change the AVMA from the inside, but also through other organizations on the outside that represent veterinarians, be like, the AVMA doesn't represent us. This is the truth. So yeah, we're constantly trying to figure out how to do it. Maybe there might be some legal things, who knows? Because they seem to not be following their mission.
Do you see veterinarians in your like AVMA as in who are on the same page as of your thoughts, like who support the thought that being a vegan veterinary doctor would have? Like, do you meet such kind of colleagues in your profession?
Do I
meet such kind of people, like such kind of colleagues in AVMA who will support you on this mission and support your thoughts?
Yeah, there's one member of the House of Delegates who is, you know, totally on our side, and she's like the one lone voice. She'll take to the floor and say the thing and get like a smattering of slow clap, like and then the industry person will come on and, you know, say, how dare she, you know, and then they'll just get a round of applause. That's just, you know, how it is. But I think it'll change over time because I think too, like corporations should be seeing which way the wind is blowing, that we can't keep doing this. We're running out of water, we're running out of land to feed these animals with climate change and war. And now tariffs, like we'll see what tariffs bring, but like we bring a lot of fertilizer and stuff from other countries. So can we grow crops to feed these animals? It's just a very inefficient system, and it's with the labor issues too. Might corporations end up making more profit by producing protein without animals? I don't know, but we'll keep fighting and speaking our truth, and I think change will come. I mean, the AVMA used to have this policy against high quality, high volume spay neuter, and think that like the work that I do is devaluing the profession because we're providing services for cheap. But now they've changed their tune on that, and they celebrate access to care and high quality, high volume spay neuter, because enough veterinarians have joined it and professionalized it. So I hope that that's what happens with animal advocacy too. So we'll see.
Do companies lobby into making these policies that AVMA approves of? Like, do they lobby the organization itself? So
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they sponsor their conventions, and you'll see them at their conventions, and they have their booths, and yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Just, and you know, veterinarians work for these large companies, and they, you know, and it's you get seats on these committees too. It's like, oh, they work for this pork producer, so we're going to give them a seat up in the pork working group, the pig working group for this, you know, these guidelines or whatever. It's like you have more legitimacy if you're working with these producers, and which doesn't make any sense because you're like biased. But I literally like went to one of the AVMA veterinary leadership conferences and asked, like, do you think the AVMA would allow me to sit on a committee? And the person there who is like an AVMA leader is like, well, I don't think that they would want somebody with a political agenda. And it's like, why is animal protection like a political agenda, but literally making money for the pork industry is not viewed as a political agenda? I think just pointing out the hypocrisy hopefully will change things over time. I don't know. I hope. That's what I'm hoping on.
Well, obviously what you're doing is going into schools and various different groups and speaking about this, so that hopefully some like veterinary students also start to, you know, question what they're experiencing, and kind of go in on the same side of animal protection and not just profit off of animals.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different people going about it in different ways. I think, you know, we're making progress. If we all join together and we all, you know, start talking about this, and I think we'll make change. I think we already have. We've got so much media attention on this. So I think you just got to keep going. And it's fun to like try to take down the big giants, you know? I think a lot of people get depressed and feel hopeless, like it's such a big issue, but it's every little win, every like little story in the media, you know, like those people are just, you know, getting so angry. And when you see, like, I haven't gone through all of the FOIA documents that I've gotten where they're talking about me, like that's really rewarding too. It's like, oh, they're putting in so much effort, you know, so that's fun.
How much is media welcoming to this kind of like media in general? How much are they welcoming when you go to them, release footage?
Yeah, the media loves talking to veterinarians, and especially veterinarians with different perspectives. So, you know, I have my day job, like I don't do this full time, and we got 87 press hits last year, and obviously major media outlets, and just writing op-eds, like an op-ed appeared in Time magazine. So, yeah, that's the one thing about being a veterinarian is you can talk to the press with some legitimacy and they'll listen, you know, because you have those letters after your name. So, yeah. Yes.
What exactly does Our Honor do outside of, like, is it mainly about like raising awareness about this, or more of like almost like a support group for vets?
Yeah, I want it to be more of a support group for vets too. And we connect like some people. We have these WhatsApp chats, but they're like, I don't know, not very engaged. And I want to make more of that in these live streams, you know, to just show, you know, that vets are talking about this. We care about these things, and you have a safe community here. I should have actually, I need to start like a pre-vet group. So if you're all interested in like doing a pre-vet group, email me and I'll start like a chat, like a signal chat or something. You can all like talk, because there are a lot of pre-vets. I need to like get connected. But yeah, and a lot of other advocacy groups will reach out and be like, do you have a veterinarian who is like this specialty for this particular case, and we'll like connect them with the right vet for that thing. So yeah, just kind of like whatever comes up. A lot of vets from labs or zoos who reach out and be like, this shit is going down here, like help. So like Miami Aquarium was that. People who work there reached out to us, and we're able to say the things that they can't because they signed NDAs. And lab animal vets who are like, this lab is a disaster. So we're able to kind of tell the world. And it's there's this Facebook group called Badass Docs. And it's really cool because it's human doctors and veterinarians like joining together, but also kind of disturbing. There was one human doctor who's like, my daughter wants to go to vet school and she wants to be able to treat sanctuary animals. And she's also interested in doing research. And they're like, oh, she should become a lab animal vet. And the doctor's like, yeah, but she doesn't want to torture animals. And all these vets piled on and were like, lab animal vets don't torture animals. And it's like, lab animal vets have come to me and they said they tried to change things in their labs and weren't able to and felt like they were torturing animals. Like, we need to recognize that like we're literally causing harm to animals for the benefit of humans in a lot of cases, and we don't need to do that. And I'm all for research because we need to develop medications to help animals, but it can be done not in labs where animals are kept in cages. We can do more clinic-based research. A lot of the new cures coming out for dogs, like the various vaccines for cancers, were developed in clinics on animals who had those diseases, and they tried drugs in the clinic, and so the dog had an advocate, and they were receiving care that benefited them. So, and like the avian flu outbreak, there's so much testing that we're not doing out in the field because we're wasting time doing like gain of function research in labs when we literally have gain of function research IRL happening on dairy farms that we should be looking at. And so I think we just need to redirect our investments away from the varium-based research on caged animals and these knockout mice and more clinic-based research. And imagine if, so like real quick, we spend $38 billion a year on veterinary care for our dogs and cats and pets. We also spend our taxpayer dollars, $38 billion a year of our taxpayer dollars go to support animal agriculture corporations. $24 billion a year go to animal research. We could literally provide publicly funded vet care for all animals if we redirected those funds. So imagine you bring your animal to the vet and now they're part of a research study and they can get all the diagnostics they need. And we produce papers and research out of what is going on with your animal. Like, I think we would get a lot farther with that sort of research than with research on animals in cages and doing these cruel experiments to them. Just like looking at the animals out there who have the diseases, finding out what's wrong with them, because so many animals aren't getting the care that they need. And people too, we could have that same model with human beings, like houseless people are not getting the care that they need. And we need to just make that accessible, because what's the point of developing cures if nobody has access to it? So I kept you so long. I know it's 6:10, so if you have to go, I know there's like a protest happening too. But do you have any more questions? I'm happy to answer questions too.
Does Avian have any say for making policies for lab animals? Like animals not like in a med school, but when in a university lab where they're doing research for generating like making some medicine or some other kind of experiments, but that are done on animals. Does Avian have any say in that?
The only say that the AVMA has there is they have their guidelines for euthanasia and depopulation. So they set guidelines for how animals are killed in labs. But that's pretty much it. And I think it's mostly deferred to like, basically IACUC committees can decide anything. Like they can, the IACUC, the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committees at universities, approve protocols for animal experiments. And whatever's needed, if it's for the purpose of that experiment, you can pretty much do whatever you want to these animals. There's industry groups that like set guidelines for cage sizes and stuff like that. I don't think the AVMA has, I forget what's the name of the group that does that, but labs can pretty much do whatever they want to animals in a lot of ways, unfortunately. And there's like the USDA Animal Welfare Act, which sets guidelines on how some animals are cared for in labs, but it doesn't cover mice and
It's species specific.
yeah. So yeah.
So even if there's cruelty happening in that lab, there's nothing they could do. Right?
If it's approved by the IACUC, and I think lawyers and attorneys are looking at various ways to deal with some of the things, but it's really hard because they can get away with kind of whatever they want in a lot of cases. And sometimes, like if you have a veterinarian on the inside who is overseeing it, and you have a friendly USDA inspector who's also friendly to our cause, we can now go after that lab and deal with it. But unless you have both those things, it's really hard to address some of these issues. But I think that's kind of what we want to do, is we want to inspire more people to become USDA inspectors to like actually be able to enforce things. And I think everybody should do a stint in an animal lab and try to change some things and try to get them to move away from doing these things. You might have the opportunity to sit on an institutional animal care and use committee, sit on those and try to shut down some of these experiments and encourage them to use animal-free methods instead, or other methods. But I've talked to a lot of people who are like, yeah, I tried and got kicked off of the IACUC, which that happens with human experimentation too. Talked to people who sat on human institutional review boards and didn't want to approve a human unethical experiment, and they were kicked off. It's just a huge problem with any committee. And I worked in a shelter too, where we had a euthanasia committee, and it always felt like all the other people are like ganging up on me. Like, we have to convince Crystal that we have to kill this dog. And it's like, well, we've all decided this is the right thing to do for public safety and everything. And then it's like, I'm the only one. I'm the one, holding it. So it's a really tough situation. It's really easy to be bullied by the other people on the committee, which is a problem with committees.
A lot of that happens at the university level too. Like chancellors have a lot of weight when it comes to what kind of grants are allowed to be written, and what Chris was referring to with the NIH grants, the $28 billion that are going towards. Once the grant's written and the money is allocated, that's going to happen. And then it's just, that's why you see activists screaming and yelling at chancellors a lot of times, because they're the ones that are kind of at the last signature on those grants. And why you hear about a lot of these advocacy groups going after Congress, trying to reduce what kind of experiments are going to be approved through the NIH.
Yeah.
I remember a very famous example of a professor from Harvard University who has been funded for so many years for running some experiments on a monkey, and they have not produced any good results. But the experiment has been happening even now.
Yeah, it depends on what you call a good result, right? So like I was involved in one of the Harvard protests that resulted in many felony counts because of a glitter thing. And but because they're still testing on monkeys, marmosets, and macaques at Harvard and UMass, all of those kind of Massachusetts schools are doing primate research. Primate usually gets in the news because people care about monkeys a lot. Or dogs and cats if they can find them. And we usually don't find about how horrific they are until a FOIA request finally comes through. Like you'll see some PETA documentation.
Right, I saw that.
And those photos are sometimes 5-10 years old because it takes FOIA that long to produce the documentation. But usually primate, they have to import those animals, or they go from UC Davis and they have to track where those monkeys are going, and you can start connecting dots and finding out what's going on.
Even with Neuralink, I think nothing really happened after that, right? I think they were sued, but I don't see any progress after that.
Yeah.
What happened with those
I mean, Neuralink, all their stuff is done in-house privately, so you can't really get any, although I wonder if they have like any NIH funding or government funding, we could potentially try to get some information on that. But yeah, we actually had a vet who spoke to the media about that. So that was helpful to have a lab animal vet who lended her experience and authority working with primates to that story.
There's also a website where for public universities, which Cornell is partially a public university, they put the amount of like different species of animals and experiments that are going on, because if they're a public university, I think they have to report it.
Even lab cook, right, has to report certain species.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's this whole, like, this is a file of like all the different experiments. I can also send them,
Cool.
but there's also the specific ones about animals used, and what specific animals are used, and then also the pain category, and how, like, what's it called? The experiments on. Yeah, I can send them with the group.
Yeah, almost every university has a page like that. They usually call it care and use or something like that, care and use page, and you can find out what.
Yeah.
And they put it right. That's the thing. Like even these advocacy groups that go on their campuses, they're not telling you anything that's not on the campus website. Like that's already available. It's just you have to look for it, but most of that information is available.
Yeah, some people told me that.
Cornell even has a group that targets like pre-vet undergrads where you do volunteer work to care for lab animals, and it's a way you can gain clinical hours, and it's literally just like assisting in cleaning stalls and kennels for the animals that are being used for experimentation. It's called like Cornell's Caring Clinical Hours.
Wow. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is really interesting.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah, very inspiring too.
Yes.
I love how you just like, even with the negative comments and all that, like push through and almost use it to feel like, as fuel.
Yeah, like look at the problem. Look, they're proving my point. That's kind of what I.
Would you be sharing this with us, this presentation?
Yeah, it's on my YouTube channel right now. We're live streaming, so it'll be there and on all of my social media. It's on my Facebook, it's on my Twitter and everything. So please follow me, Dr. Crystal Heath, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Our Honor Vets on all the social media platforms too. And yeah.
Thank you.
All right.